Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the first video of 2021. I thought we could kick off the year by talking about something a little bit more light and bright, you know, like maybe the impending doom that everybody on this platform faces when they upload content on here, no matter how big and successful they are. Irrelevancy. One of the best aspects of YouTube is that anybody can join the platform whenever the hell they want, and it's clear that a lot of people have been joining the platform as of recent. As of May 2019, apparently 500 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every minute, which is kind of crazy, especially when you consider that that was 2019, and there's probably been a lot more uploaded every minute in 2020, which of course is great because it means that the platform is constantly changing and isn't just staying the same. I feel like it would kind of suck if it was like the same small group of people who had joined YouTube early and gotten really big that were still taking control over the platform. So it's nice that anybody really has the potential to go viral on here. But it also means that no matter how big you are on YouTube, you're still susceptible to expiring on the platform. Before we continue on with the video though, I do want to give a quick shout out to Audible, who sponsored today's video. If you haven't heard of them before, Audible is actually the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks. They've got bestsellers, new releases, basically any genre under the sun, and they even host podcasts now too. I've really gotten into audiobooks this year because it's allowed me to read during times that I previously couldn't, if that makes sense. For example, I used to try to read while I would cook or do laundry, and it usually never went well because I'd only be able to pick up the book for like 2 seconds because I was obviously in the middle of doing something, and it just made the reading experience less immersive. It was definitely very frustrating, especially if I was at a good part of the book. So the nice thing about the audiobooks is that I'm now able to listen to the story with no interruptions while I'm doing chores or just anything where I wouldn't have been able to multitask reading before. It's also definitely nice while walking as well, because I've realized that whenever I try to take a physical book out walking, I turn into the slowest walker on planet Earth, which is definitely not ideal. But in general, I'm just noticing that because I'm listening to books at times where I wouldn't have been able to read before, I'm getting through books a lot quicker and I'm just reading more in general. Right now I'm actually listening to A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, which if you've been around on my channel since the booktube days, you know it's definitely been a long time coming because I've been very stubborn with starting this series. The reason it's taken me so long to get into it is every time I would sit down with this book specifically, I just could not get myself to get into it. So what I actually did this time around was, while I was trying to read the physical book, actually played the audiobook and read along with it, and it actually really helped a lot. It just made it a lot more immersive and easier to get into and actually commit to the story. And it's nice because if I do want to read the book and listen to the audiobook at the same time, I can, but in times where I can't read the book because I'm like walking or doing something at the same time, but I still want to continue the story, I can just listen to the audiobook on its own. If YA isn't your thing though, Audible still has thousands of different genres for you to choose from, so you're bound to find something that you want to check out. Audible's also recently launched Audible Plus, where with the membership you can get full access to their Plus catalog, which has thousands of select originals, audiobooks, podcasts, and even ad-free versions of popular shows and exclusive series. So if you want to give it a try, visit audible.com/caseyaonso or text caseyaonso to 500 to start your free 30-day trial. Thanks again to Audible for sponsoring. If you're interested, definitely check them out, but otherwise let's get to the video. I do want to note quickly before we start this video that while I am going to be using the term expire, I don't mean it as in the amount of likes or views that you get on your content or engagement is the only source of measurement for whether your content is worth watching or not. I definitely feel like one of the sadder parts about YouTube, but I guess that could also be applied to any social media platform, is that while analytics can be helpful, they also can take a really big toll on how excited you are to upload things onto that platform. And spoiler alert, it's one of the reasons why a lot of people leave the platform. But before we start talking about that kind of stuff and expiration in general in terms of how creators expire, why they expire, and what they do post-expiration, I do want to talk about YouTube as a platform and how sustainable I think a job like that can be. So the big question is YouTube a sustainable job? No. YouTube as a platform and just the communities that thrive within it are constantly changing, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that. Just by taking a glance at the trending tab today versus like 5 years ago, there's a huge difference in the kind of content that YouTube is boosting and the type of content that people want to watch to begin with. Years ago, YouTube was filled with like shorter skit style videos, and those did super well on the platform and built some of the first big YouTube stars we ever saw. Nowadays, you see them prioritize either behemoth-sized videos or at least any kind of video that's over 12 minutes because they want to keep people on the site longer. And since none of us really know definitively how the algorithm works, you can unknowingly kill your channel by just putting out a few dud videos, which can be terrifying when that's your source of income. And you might hear that and think, oh, so YouTube just has to be more transparent about their algorithm and then creators will feel more comfortable and secure. But It's not really that easy, because if YouTube told us definitively how the algorithm worked and how we could get onto trending and in recommended, people would abuse the shit out of that. So at least in my opinion, I do think it's best that YouTube keeps most of the algorithm a secret, just to kind of save people from polluting the shit out of the site. But it does leave creators in a bit of a bind when it comes to figuring out if a video is going to do well or not, because you could have a video that you think hits every single mark that you would need for a successful video, like previous interest from subscribers, or it's just a trending topic, and even then it might still flop. And that could be completely based on factors that you don't even realize influence the algorithm because you don't know how it works. And of course, if your videos aren't doing well, then your channel's not doing well either. I'm sure that everyone knows by now that we're paid by views instead of subscribers, which does make complete sense, but it also means that no matter how gigantic of an audience you have, you never have complete security on the platform. By the way, I'm not petitioning for or against anything when it comes to YouTube's algorithm, because I don't really know how it fully works, so I can't really pass judgment on it. I'm mainly just bringing this up to state the obvious here, which is that YouTube definitely isn't a sustainable job. Something as small as a slight change in the algorithm due to maybe the interests of YouTube as a platform, or just the community in general, could completely destroy your channel. So it's quite volatile, meaning that YouTubers expiring is extremely common, and if anything, it's quite rare to see a YouTuber be able to remain super popular for more than a handful of years. So if YouTubers are expiring a lot, then that must mean that there are a lot of ways that YouTubers expire. And I definitely agree with that, because I don't think that there's really one single answer for how YouTubers expire on the platform. And sometimes the word expire doesn't even really fit into the reason why they left the platform, but for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to be sticking with that word for now. But a few reasons that I could think of, which this is definitely not a definitive list whatsoever, were that they get kicked off the platform by YouTube, they get run off the platform by the YouTube community, they leave on their own accord due to their channel not doing well anymore, or they leave on their own accord at a point when their channel is still doing well. So there's a decent number of reasons that people can leave the platform, and I'm sure there's many other reasons that are beyond the ones that I gave myself. But I think even considering the ones that I couldn't even think of, I think all of those reasons boil down to two ways that somebody can expire, which are involuntarily and voluntarily. And I think it's best to add some context and at least put some faces behind these reasons. So as I'm going through them, I'll kind of show a channel that I feel like best exemplifies that reason. The first reason is definitely a rarity, at least in my opinion, because I feel like I don't really see that many people getting kicked off the platform by YouTube themselves. I feel like one of the more recent and well-known examples would be Leafy. If you haven't heard of Leafy before, he was known as one of the edgy commentators and was part of the original early group of commentators on the platform. So his fan base is definitely very passionate about him, but I feel like it's more so because Leafy kind of extends beyond himself now, and is more so like a symbol of old commentary YouTube. But his content for the most part was just talking about situations or giving his thoughts on drama over gameplay footage. He definitely was one of those people who thought that being offensive and insensitive was a personality trait, which of course got him in a lot of trouble with YouTube as the years went on and more rules started being implemented. But the reason that he actually got kicked off the platform was because he had made a slew of videos about Pokimane, who is a Twitch streamer. Regardless of what your opinion is on what YouTube's turned into with all these new rules and terms, I don't really think you can argue that somebody directly breaking rules that have been listed out is some sort of example that anybody could be next, which is honestly the most frustrating take that I've seen a lot of YouTubers making with the Leafy situation. But that's besides the point. What I'm trying to get at here is that the main focus is that Leafy's expiration was at the hands of YouTube itself as a platform, because they were the ones that kicked him off. The other kind of involuntary expiration that you can have as a YouTuber doesn't actually come at the hands of YouTube as a platform, but YouTube as a community. Cancel culture has become a hot topic these days, obviously, with a lot of creators being held accountable for their actions, which honestly, most of the time doesn't actually end in them not being able to continue whatever they're doing as a job. But some examples that I can think of, at least in my opinion, that feel like cancel culture actually worked are in the case of Shane Dawson and Tobuscus. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the actual stories behind their cancellation and all that kind of stuff, because they are very long stories that I feel like other videos tell better. So if you're interested in learning more about either of their stories, I would definitely check out the Right Opinions video on Tobuscus and D'Angelo Wallace's video on Shane Dawson. I'll have both of them linked in the pinned comment down below if you haven't checked them out already. What's interesting to me, at least, about YouTubers expiring at the hands of their own community or the communities kind of surrounding them on YouTube is that it's a lot harder to come back in a different way. It's not a roadblock where YouTube's just going, you can't come on here. It's the community saying you're not welcome here. Of course, there's always going to be some people that continue to support creators regardless of the controversy that they've been in, maybe because they either are completely out of the loop and don't know what happened, or they do know and they just don't care. But regardless, when the overwhelming majority already feels like you aren't welcome there, it's definitely a pretty big hurdle to come over and come back. The next reason is that they leave on their own accord due to their channel not doing well, which I think is the most natural one, considering that obviously if you're not getting the same engagement you used to, it affects how excited you are to upload in the first place. There are definitely countless examples of YouTubers who were massive back in the day, and now that they don't get the same amount of views or engagement, just aren't really on the platform anymore. Names like Bart Baker or Ray William Johnson definitely come to mind, but by no means is the list short. And I think this decision isn't as overwhelmingly a monetary one as people think it is. I think when people see someone leave a channel, it's because they immediately think, oh, it's because they don't make as much money off of it anymore, or they aren't able to make ends meet. Of course, making less money on the platform where it's not able to be your only stream of income anymore would make you want to post less, but in terms of actually stepping back from the platform completely, I feel like that's more of like a morale kind of thing. Just imagine being like a massive creator and getting millions upon millions of views, tons of engagement, having millions of fans, and then it either slowly kind of dwindles down or it's gone in like a few months. Of course, that definitely takes a mental toll on you, because who wants to jump onto a platform where you're just seeing how bad you're doing in comparison to your peak? It's definitely a shitty situation to be in, and also the complete opposite of the next reason that I'm going to be going into, which is somebody leaving their own channel when their channel's still doing extremely well. When it comes to voluntarily leaving your channel at a point where it's still doing great, while I was kind of looking for examples, I thought I was going to have a really hard time of finding YouTubers for this, but the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized it's super common these days. Names that come to mind personally for me are people like Michelle Phan, Liza Koshy, and more recently Chloe Couture, which does leave me wondering, why would you leave your channel if you're still doing really well? But the answer to that is more clear once you kind of look into the paths that YouTubers take after expiring on the platform, whether voluntarily or not. The most common paths that I could find, which once again, definitely not definitive by any means, is that a lot of them start their own businesses, attempt to become a mainstream celebrity, become managers or editors for other social media people, shift to a different platform, get a normal job, pivot, go dark, or make a new channel. So let's start off with starting their own business. I feel like this is actually pretty common for YouTubers who both voluntarily or involuntarily expire, but I feel like the best example of it is definitely Michelle Phan. While there definitely are a lot of beauty YouTubers who've started their own brand, Michelle is the only one who left the platform with like no explanation for like over a year, then came back with her own brand. Which, when you think about it, leaving a platform for over a year where your audience is, and then coming back to introduce a line instead of just consistently posting content and then introducing it is pretty risky. Regardless of that break, her line is still doing extremely well, and it's clear that YouTube is definitely not her priority anymore, as her uploads are more of a rarity than anything. So while Michelle's not on YouTube as much and definitely wouldn't be seen as like a big active guru in the current community right now, and some might actually see her as like an expired one considering how little she posts, she might not be killing it on YouTube per se in that kind of context. She's just killing it in a different way. When it comes to expiring on YouTube in an attempt to become a mainstream celebrity, I feel like this is only really common with YouTubers who voluntarily leave their channel while still doing really well. In this kind of case, I immediately think of Liza Koshy, who was at the top of her game when she just kind of stopped uploading and just focused on her YouTube Red TV show, and then after that, just kind of started pursuing things outside of YouTube altogether. She even scored an opportunity interviewing people at the Met Gala and was also in a Netflix show more recently, so she's definitely one of the few YouTubers that I feel like has made that transition from YouTube into mainstream Hollywood. So again, like Michelle Phan, while she's expired on YouTube in the sense that she's not like the most current trendy creator on the platform, she's just killing it in a different way outside of the platform. And for both of them, that was just their own decision that they wanted to move on to something else. When it comes to YouTubers who decide to become managers or editors for other social media people, I feel like this is most common with YouTubers who either left the platform because their views aren't doing as well, or they aren't able to make as much of a living off of it anymore, or they're just disinterested in being a YouTuber themselves but still want to be in the space but just in a different way. This is actually a lot more common than I thought. I didn't even consider that this was something that a lot of YouTubers did until this past year when I noticed a lot of people starting to offer editing as a YouTuber themselves. And it would make sense that a lot of people wouldn't know this, or at least that I didn't know it, because obviously you wouldn't know that somebody was editing a video unless they had it in the credits because they're not in the video themselves. One example that I could think of was Jessie Smiles, who apparently edits sometimes for Kathleen Lights as well as some other YouTubers, but I couldn't actually find any definitive names online, so we'll just leave it at that. It is one of those paths though that as I was thinking about it, I was like, how did I never consider that this was something that somebody might do after YouTube? Like, it's a perfect fit that you would start editing other people's YouTube videos because you've been editing your own for however long. And the management thing also makes perfect sense. Like, who wouldn't want a manager that not only knows the industry, has connections and knows the community, but also has been in your shoes before and could give you advice on it? Another common path beyond becoming a manager or an editor for other creators is that a lot of YouTubers will shift from YouTube to a different platform. I feel like the most common shift right now that we're seeing with a lot of YouTubers is either to Twitch or with podcasts. You may remember from my Team 10 video that a lot of ex-Team 10 members have actually been making the shift to Twitch, which makes complete sense. It's still the action of making content for your audience, but it's a fresh start for someone who's like gone from mega fame to maybe a lower class of fame, considering that Team 10's gone like kind of downhill recently. But also on top of that, I feel like it's a more relaxed way of making content. Or maybe that kind of depends on the streamer, so maybe I don't want to commit to that sentence. More than anything though, I feel like the shift from either YouTube to a podcast or YouTube to Twitch is more so just the desire for a fresh start more than anything, and just trying out something different, because if you've been doing one thing for ages, you're probably going to want to try something new. And I probably should say that I feel like this kind of path is one that doesn't just appeal to YouTubers who've expired, whether that's involuntarily or voluntarily, or YouTubers who are still active that just want to try something different at the same time. Of course, there is always the obvious path that some YouTubers will just leave the platform and then get a normal job, but I feel like that isn't as interesting of a path to talk about as pivoting, because I love a good pivot. Successfully pivoting on YouTube can be hard as hell, and I can honestly speak from personal experience with that. It was definitely on a much smaller scale, so I can't even imagine how tough it would have been to do that when you have millions of subscribers who have been expecting a style of content that you've been producing for years. When it comes to big channels successfully pivoting, I do think that there's two pretty solid examples, but I know for a fact that you guys are not gonna like one of them that I mentioned, but I hope that it goes without saying that me saying that a channel successfully pivoted well doesn't mean that I endorse their actions or past actions. And the two people in question are Anthony Padilla and Shane Dawson. So let's start with Anthony. If you've been on YouTube for a while, then the name Anthony definitely rings a bell, because he was part of the iconic YouTube duo Smosh. I cannot begin to tell you the impact that Smosh had on my childhood, and I'm sure millions of other kids too, but even with Smosh being massive back then and being able to hold on to their popularity for a long time, YouTube changed as a platform, and the original huge creators just couldn't not necessarily keep up, but their content just wasn't meeting the needs of the massive new influx of users and the communities that were starting to form. Anthony did end up leaving Smosh, and he focused instead on his personal channel, where the content on there was pretty much your standard kind of like variety YouTuber kind of content. But his decision to pivot from that kind of content into a series called I Spent the Day with Blank was clearly the best choice he could have made for his channel, because all of those videos did really well. They continue to do super well, to the point where it's the only series that he hosts on his channel right now. So he basically went from being famous through Smosh to being famous through his I Spent the Day with series. I think the reason that I like seeing big channels pivot successfully so much is because there is such a big risk in doing that. Like, you could completely risk your entire audience, but the payoff of that is just so satisfying to see people be able to like successfully change their content and everybody still enjoys it a lot. Another pivot that I think that we have to mention is Shane Dawson, because he didn't just pivot once, but he pivoted twice successfully. Of course, separating Shane from his content shift, I do think that he is one of the most successful examples of shifting your content and not only being able to continue making ends meet through YouTube, but almost being even more famous than you were originally. I'm sure that we all know that Shane started off on YouTube doing skits and parodies of music videos before shifting into doing conspiracy videos and more typical YouTuber content. But his final shift with his content, which was his most successful era, was his docuseries era. I think that Shane's ability to shift successfully so many times was because of two different factors, were that he really knew when trends were happening and when to make the right kind of content, and that he had a very large dedicated fan base that just liked him for him and didn't really give a shit about what kind of content that he was making. But speaking of Shane, while he did successfully pivot twice, that was well before the controversy that he experienced in this past year. And he's actually one of the few creators that successfully fits into two of these different paths, because while he did successfully pivot his content twice, he's also since gone dark on social media. I definitely feel like this is the kind of path that YouTubers take either for personal reasons or because they've been canceled quite effectively. I feel like Shane's the best example for describing this path right now because he's not only the most recent, but also one of the biggest channels that's gone dark. He hasn't uploaded in half a year, he barely posts on social media unless it's like something temporary, like on his Instagram story, but even then he always tries to make it like super positive and doesn't really reference anything that happened. Other than that, of course, he's just been completely MIA. And the thing with YouTubers that go dark, especially considering the context that it was due to involuntarily expiring on the platform, there's always that looming question of if they'll ever come back or if they'll just choose a different path. For now though, when it comes to Shane, it's just a very big question mark. The final path that we'll be talking about is definitely one that also applies to both involuntarily and voluntarily expiring on the platform, but considering the example that we mentioned earlier, it's going to be focused more on involuntarily leaving, and that's because we're talking about making a new channel in regards to Leafy. What's unique about the situation that Leafy landed himself in is that he can't get his channel back if he wanted to. Like usually when people leave YouTube, their channel is still up, they don't decide to terminate it because if they ever want to come back, the channel's still there, but in this case, that shit's gone. And on top of that, YouTube is actively trying to make sure that you can't come back. Well, not technically, because he does have a new channel apparently. As of now, it seems like he's using the loophole of uploading content to a channel called Weefy, which technically isn't his, but it's owned by a company called Red Bloom, and so he's just a host for the channel. He doesn't actually own it. Hooray! So I guess by that example, it means that even if you are kicked off YouTube, it's not really a question of not being able to get back on the platform, it's how many elaborate hoops are you willing to jump through to get back on the platform. But regardless of getting back on the platform, however way that you weasel your way back in, that doesn't change the fact that even if you had millions and millions of subscribers on your original channel, you're not going to be able to get back all of those subscribers with like a simple snap of your fingers. So I guess in the case of involuntary expiration, where YouTube as a platform is kicking you off, what happens to you depends on how determined you are to get a channel on YouTube again, but also how dedicated your fan base is to seeking you out again too. So it's clear that while YouTubers do expire often, there are a ton of different paths that they can decide to go down when it comes to what they do beyond the original YouTube channel they blew up on, and that depends a lot on the context of their expiration. If you guys have any YouTubers that you thought of while watching this video that you feel like have an interesting expiration story or post-expiration comeback story, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. But if you did enjoy the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. I'm also going through my YouTube midlife crisis, so I've started a Twitch channel where I've been streaming for the past couple weeks, and it's been a ton of fun. So if you want to watch or play some games with me on stream, I'll be linking it in the pinned comment down below. But if you want to follow me outside of YouTube, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter, which are both caseyaonso. And otherwise, that's about it for me. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.